Mm. So when we're looking at questions like the existence of God, obviously like people have different kind of like ways of like approaching the topic, and you talk about having like coming from a more like almost like theory based approach. So could you kind of go into that, like how do you think about like finding like the best explanation in terms of like specifically like today talking about like the question of like is there a God or not?
So I guess what I'm interested in is that think of people as having theories. We call them worldviews, but the difference between a worldview and a theory is just that not all theories are worldviews, but I think all worldviews are theories. Um, so if you think of two people with different worldviews and you want to ask which one's better, the question that you're asking is who's got the better theory, right?
Mm.
And so then there's a question: how do you compare theories in order to decide, when you've got two theories that are in competition with one another, to decide which one's better? So that, I think, is the right framework for thinking about it. And I think it's important probably to say somewhere near the beginning, that once you start thinking about things that way, it becomes obvious that arguments are kind of secondary, because once you've got a theory, right? So you've got a commitment to saying that this claim's true and that one's false, and this one's true and that one's false across a wide range of claims. Then, assuming that you're good at working out which arguments are valid and which aren't, that is, when conclusions are supported by premises and when they're not, your attitude about which arguments are sound is completely determined by your theory, right? And that's why
Mhm.
arguments are not that interesting, right? Theory is prior to argument, and we should be interested in who's got the better theory. And then the stuff about argument just ceases to be interesting.
Mm. So what do you think then, maybe going into a little bit of the problems, like some people may like wonder like why should we prefer like maybe like your way of thinking about these things in terms of like arguments? Because some people may be like, well, like especially like if you look at like philosophy of religion, it's like there's certain like arguments that'll be used to say, well, atheism can't explain things like maybe like morality or fine tuning, or like maybe in contrast, like theism can't explain things like evil or hiddenness. So like, what do you think is like kind of like maybe not wrong, but like, why do you think people should prefer potentially like your approach to thinking about these things primarily?
Well, the thing that you were just describing, though, was, I mean, wasn't couched in terms of arguments. It was couched in
Hmm.
terms of theories. You've got a theory that can't explain this data, right? That's a
Hmm.
black mark against your theory, right? So we're going to take it that it's data, that there's horrendous evil in the world, and you, Mr. Theist, you don't have an explanation for it in your theory, right?
Hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you've got the worst theory overall, right? And the really interesting question is the overall question, not the pick some particular bit of data and see which theory is doing better. But it seems to me that the way that you were just talking fits exactly into the approach that I want to take.